Hello, everybody. This is the Legends and Landmarks series for Spark, and we are here today with special guests to talk about Tekkonkinkreet on its 15th year anniversary. First, a bit about myself. My name is Kurt Halfyard. I'm based out of Toronto. And I have been contributing articles for a website called Screen Anarchy, formerly TrickFilm, about genre film and art house and grindhouse films from all over the planet. We like films from everywhere. I do articles, interviews, and occasionally crash podcasts. Our wonderful technical hosts at Spark and the producer Marina and I ran a website many moons ago, also on film, and mostly I'm sort of a film festival tourist. If there's a film festival in your neck of the world and I can by any means get out of mine and into yours, I love going. I love traveling and seeing films with huge audiences. Um, I mean, with Tekkonkinkreet, I first saw the film when it opened the Fantasia Film Festival in July 2007, which was my first time at that festival in person and the first film that I saw at that festival. So when Spark asked me to host this panel, it was super exciting because I just remember the atmosphere and the intensity of that film, which hit an unprepared audience who may have been familiar with Studio 4 Degrees C, but I don't think they were prepared for just how immersive and big and frankly adult that movie is. It comes at you pretty hardcore, and it's almost impossible to take in one viewing. But 15 years later, I am joined by the director of the film, Michael Arias. He started his career doing motion control and camera work at DreamQuest Images and worked on films from James Cameron, The Abyss, and Paul Verhoeven's Total Recall as a camera assistant and motion control. And he was tapped by Douglas Trumbull to do the motion of the Back to the Future ride for Universal Studios. He's crafted digital title sequences for films as far as reached as David Cronenberg, Spike Lee, Robert Altman, and the Coen brothers. The Hudsucker Proxy is a favorite, particularly the text and graphics in that film. His work on tools and software for combining CGI with traditional cell animation was used in Studio Ghibli's Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away, and he holds a patent on that technology, which I believe is also used by DreamWorks in Prince of Egypt and The Road to El Dorado. He produced the Animatrix anthology for the Wachowskis, of which several segments were created and made by Studio 4 Degrees C. His feature film making debut was with the animation studio, 4 Degrees C, and it was Tekkonkinkreet, which we're going to talk about in depth. He's also holds the distinction of the first American to head a major anime feature. He has directed a live action feature in Japan, Heaven's Door, as well as the animated feature from a few years ago, Harmony, which was co-directed with Takashi Nakamura. He has produced television in Japan, Tokyo Alien Brothers from 2018, with, and forgive me if I get the name wrong, Shintazo Sugawaza. He also writes about Japanese culture in both English and Japanese, and has translated several major manga by Taiyo Matsumoto, who is also, of course, the creator of Tekkonkinkreet. He often collaborates with the UK electronic arts duo Plaid, and has worked with writer Anthony Weintraub on Paul Weitz's Bel Canto, which Anthony wrote and Michael did the title sequence for, as well as directing segments of Amazon's Mozart in the Jungle, which also has a connection to Anthony. And I'm also joined by screenwriter Anthony Weintraub, who did his MA in film production at the University of South Carolina and worked on story editing for a variety of American big studios. And he was story editor, one of many, on the Animatrix, where I assume, and we will talk about his collaborations with Michael began. And he went on to adapt Tekkonkinkreet for the big screen. After he formed a company called Yumiko, if I've got that pronunciation right, a media company who developed projects and screenplays for DreamWorks, Canada's CBC, and as well as Amazon Studios. He has directed a number of his own short films, consults with nonprofits such as Human Rights Watch and Film Aid International on special events and media work. He lectures at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. His production company, A-Line, out of New York, produced Bel Canto with Julianne Moore and Ken Watanabe, which was directed by Paul Weitz, and he co-wrote it with the screenplay with Paul Weitz, and which him and his wife, Carolyn Barron, produced. And because I can't resist, I was also tapping into his wife's bio, and somehow she went from Lloyd Kaufman's The Toxic Avenger to Bennett Miller's Truman Capote, and finally and Mia Nair, Monsoon Wedding, and whatnot. Just such a global collection of productions over the years, even getting up to Tekkonkinkreet, and then of course you guys have had quite a run afterwards. So please welcome Michael and Anthony, and I will shut up now.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thanks, Kurt.
I'm going to make one correction, and it was University of Southern California.
Did I?
Not South Carolina, but that's okay. Thank you for that. So probably the first time I've heard that many of my credits said in at one time. So,
well, it's certainly a delight to speak with you both, and to really see the breadth of work leading up to Tekkonkinkreet and then after. I feel for both of you, that's kind of right in the middle of your careers, right?
yeah, I could say that.
Yes.
And I mean, and Tekkonkinkreet itself started out as a 4-minute almost technical demo. Maybe Michael, you can walk us through from where the film began in that very raw form. It is on YouTube, you can find it, up to the sort of gonzo detailed polished production that was released into the theaters in 2006.
Sure. Well, back around early 96, when the manga of Tekkonkinkreet was just coming out in book form, having been serialized up to that point. I read it on the recommendation of a friend, and it just stuck with me. And at the time, I was kind of on my own doing R&D for this animation software. The stuff that was, I think I was actually helping out Studio Ghibli at the time. And as kind of like a demo scene just to test my work out on, because I wasn't actually embedded in a production, I was just working at home. and sending stuff in. Just as a kind of quick and dirty demo, I had built a scene, not even a scene, like a shot from Tekkon, just lifted right out of the manga. And, it was, now it looks very primitive, and, but at the time it was, 1996 was still kind of very innocent time in computer graphics. So, it was, you could do anything, and there was some novelty to it. So it got a lot of attention just, from, well, basically from my buddies. So it wasn't anything really special, but, because that was how I was demoing my software to the Ghibli guys and folks at Studio 4 Degrees and DreamWorks, and I was always using this shot from Tekkonkinkreet, and at some point I started telling people that I was making a movie of it, and that was, yeah, I don't really remember the actual moment when I took it in that direction, but I was well, just very naive about how things are done. But by accident, really, I met a couple guys who were starting up a small, like, CG studio. It was kind of envisioned as a, like, incubation kind of animation school for the game company Sega. And one of the producers there, and a former colleague at Sega, and the animation director, Koji Morimoto, were all involved at some level in this little company. And when they asked me what I was doing or what I wanted to do, I think I just said, Tekkonkinkreet, I'm doing it. And people got very excited, not so much by how, great my little experiment was, but it was, those guys were all into Tekkon too, and we kind of bonded on that. Just, oh yeah, Taiyo Matsumoto, because at the time he was not, I mean, he's still not a mainstream manga artist, though, over the years, he's got some serious fans, and he's seen as a real voice.
He was
But
culty at the time, like he had a
yeah, at
cult
the
following.
time he was kind of, not, I wouldn't say underground, because his stuff has a pretty sort of middle class sensibility, but it was not big selling titles. So anyways, one of those guys knew another guy who actually knew Taiyo personally, a journalist who had interviewed him a couple times and stayed in touch. And through that chain of friends, we got a VHS copy of this shot that I had done to Taiyo, and he was into it. And I think initially we were just going to take our comics and have him sign them for us, and have a share a drink with him or whatever. But we kind of, that first meeting with him turned into this, like, well, we're going to make a full CG movie of Tekkonkinkreet. This is before Toy Story was out in theaters, so for us, doing a full CG feature was just like, I mean, we were like acting like small children, basically. Just in the naivete of,
That's very on point, though,
we
with the
we
subject
were,
matter.
yeah. So Tayo gave us his support because at that point he had there was one indie live action feature that was being made based on his work, a movie called Blue Spring, which is like a punk masterpiece. If you ever have a chance to see it, I really recommend it. But it was a very, you know, small movie. And so he wasn't, well, I think he was just charmed by the idea of people wanting to make a animated movie and computer graphics, no less. Must have seemed very novel. And so those guys and I and a few other friends got together in a converted karaoke bar in Tokyo where we managed to, the game folks at Sega gave us a lot of gear and some money to make this little pilot film with Koji storyboarding and me kind of being the producer slash technical director slash, you know, cheerleader for the production.
Was the collaboration between video game industry and the animation industry, was that a thing at the time, or was that just very specific circumstances?
I think a lot of game companies were wanting to push the what are now known as cinematics. You know, then it was still, there was a pretty wide gulf between, you know, animation and imaging for games and the stuff, you know, that's done in movies.
Right. Well, I had a Sega Mega Drive at the time. I recall.
Yeah. Well, actually, the funny thing is, when I worked at Sega for 2 years, and at the end of the year, it's very typical for employees to get like a kind of Christmas bonus kind of thing, extra couple weeks worth in the paycheck, and loaded on top of that was I think it was a Mega Drive actually, and it's like, wow, now I just got to go get some games for it. But then at the end of the year's kind of a statement, you know, your pay stub for the year, you could see the price of the Mega Drive had been deducted from our bonus. You know, it actually showed up as a negative. Anyways, we did this little pilot and it got some attention. We showed it at Annecy in '99. But one of the things was, and I think by that time Anthony was involved as well. We had no actual plan to finance it or, you know, take it to the next step. We made this really cool pilot film and kind of made a neat little kind of booklet to hand out at the festivals. We had no experience shopping a movie around, or, you know, it was just, we ran into a wall pretty fast. And, you know, one by one, the team that we had put together kind of moved on to bigger and better things. Koji Morimoto lost interest. My art director and animation supervisor both went to ILM, and you know, everyone and I got involved in this whole Matrix thing, and so there were about 3 years when I was wrangling the Animatrix, and you know, that was, Anthony did a bit of work for us, story ideas and then editing dialogue and just anything to kind of keep us connected, because what we really wanted to do was TechCon. And I think by that time my enthusiasm, well, I had gotten Anthony, uh, you know, excited about actually doing something with it. And maybe, I don't know how convinced he was that there was, actual potential there, but one of the producers of the Animatrix gave us a little money to write a script, and kept it alive in that way. And I think in the early months, or the early, you know, part of that, we were still talking about getting Koji to direct it, but it became very clear he was not into the first draft that I showed him, the first draft that we translated. And it was not what he was into. And to be honest, I think he had really just lost interest with doing an adaptation of someone else's work. And his kind of parting words to me were, well, if you really want to make it so much, you go and direct it. And that, I was not ready to walk away from it. I was still very passionate about Tekkon. And, the Animatrix got me very very deeply embedded in Studio 4 Degrees, and also, made the connection with a lot of animators and art directors and, the people who you need to make a movie like Tekkon.
But you were not formally working for Studio 4 Degrees.
I wasn't working for them. I mean, I was the overall like series producer. I was working for Warner Brothers. And but because Studio 4 Degrees, one of my co-producers on the Animatrix was the head of the studio, and so I was there all the time. That's kind of where I worked out of, because it was, all the episodes, even the ones that were being done in other studios, we kind of started them and finished them at 4 Degrees. We would have our staff meetings there. We would do our kind of video storyboards there, and temp score, and all the stuff that I was working on. I was working out of Studio 4 Degrees. So though I wasn't working there per se, I was there all the time. And I think I actually ended up doing like working on CG on a couple commercial projects there. I helped out a bit with a movie called Mind Game,
which is bonkers, by the way.
It's an amazing movie.
It is
but that
amazing.
was being done at 4 Degrees, kind of while we were finishing the Animatrix. And yeah, so I wasn't an employee there, but I was.
You were a live-in.
I was one of their guys. So I think, just to catch you up to the beginning of the feature, by the end of Animatrix, the head of Studio 4 Degrees was also kind of, I think Tekkonkinkreet, for one reason or another, was on a lot of people's radar at the time. There was a live action movie called Ping Pong, which was adapted from another one of Taiyo's projects that was about to be released. And I know at one point, Tekkon was on the bookshelf at the studio, and there were people, a lot of animators were into it. That was like a kind of a touchstone of sorts. So the head of 4 Degrees kind of won me over with her enthusiasm for actually trying to do it as, forget about all that computer graphics stuff, and let's do it as a anime feature here, and you're going to direct it. I mean, that it wasn't one conversation, it was a lot of conversations, but I think she saw that, you know, if I didn't have the experience, I had the enthusiasm. I also had a very strong connection with the author, and you know, I had scrapbooks filled with my ideas for how to do it, and although they're not nice to look at, they were, you know, they were able to convey the the kind of thing that I wanted to do, and if not that, they were able to at least convey a lot of passion, which I don't know, maybe that's as good a place as any to start. Um,
It never scared anyone away that the manga was 3 volumes, and
um,
to
you,
squeeze it into a
Anthony would
film.
be a better person to ask about that. I mean, I know there were some struggles to kind of boil it all down. I don't know. Do you want to just in terms of adapting, was
Yeah, I mean,
that was
that
a
that
challenge?
there are always challenges with adaptation. I mean, I guess some people sometimes who don't really know what writing a screenplay is about and you know, writing visual narrative is about, think that it's easy to translate a book to the screen, but it's if it's just as, if not more, challenging, because I think when you're basing it on another material, to some extent, hopefully you're paying homage to the material that you're adapting it from. And then there are the challenges of creating a lean visual story from something that's purely literary. So even Tekon, which is completely visual and just incredible masterpiece in that regard, still, as you said, is 3 volumes. It's very much aligned with Tayo's style, which is, you know, beautiful line drawings that depict a slow-paced slice of life, I would say, even in the context of Tekon, which is probably his most muscular piece from a plot perspective, aside from maybe number 5 and probably throw ping pong in there.
Mm.
So yeah, it was a huge venture that took some time, but let's just take a moment to throw some props over to Tayo, because you know, you don't get involved in this stuff, and Michael's described his journey, unless you feel incredibly passionate about material. And that's the A1, number 1 start for anybody, hopefully, in our business. And even if I'm hired by, I get a call from a big studio, hey, we got this thing. I'm not going to just take it because it's a job, because I know what comes in tow. And that's a lot of time and a lot of resources. And then this was just a pure passion project, because it's one of the most incredible pieces of comic art I've ever seen. I have to admit it, that as a big fan of comics and you know, that illustrated form, this became an obsession. Maybe not equal to Michael's obsession, but probably. So it was, as Michael said, it was stuck in our heads to get it made and get it made right. So I put a big primacy on research, no matter what I'm doing, which sounds a little weird. Like, what are you going to do? Go research Yakuza aliens, you know? But no, I'm going to go, you know, talk to Tayo and find out why he's interested in this, and what's the genesis of that. And that was incredible, just to be able to not only meet him, but befriend him, and spend a fair amount of time over there. Michael and I went on some recce's to check out cities, and you know, I think we did our work, you know, that was required. So that's a long answer, but
Was
Yeah,
Tayo in consultation over the course of the screenwriting part, or was it just kind of a get a feel and then disengage to be able to work on it in such a
yeah,
way that
yeah. In the case of an author, there's a divorce that has to happen. Um, and it's the same as the material itself. You have to suddenly at some point say, bye, I love you, but this has got to become a screenplay and then a movie. And the same is true with the authors. We had some incredible fun times and some long interview sessions, which are floating around here somewhere, that were really helpful to get into his head. But definitely he wasn't. I don't think he didn't even want to be that
No, he
involved.
was, he was into his next,
right? And this would have
Tekton for him was
been many
already
10 years
years
in the rear
old,
view. Yeah, yeah.
and he was very busy on his. I think he was writing Go-Go Monster, maybe starting number 5 around that
Yeah,
time,
yeah, that's right.
and very involved in that. And I think he was. I think Tekton for him it was a very something he did when he was younger. Um, and I think he was very happy to kind of stand back and watch us, well, not just write it, but also make it. There was one like kind of kickoff dinner where I, me and my art director and a couple of the animation supervisors and producer all sat around a table and had, shared a meal. But I I think it was at that dinner he sort of said, "Okay, well, it's yours now, so good luck. I have my comic, and now you're gonna make a great movie. But do whatever you have to do."
So it was
And
like a
I think
blessing. It was almost like a
that
sending it off.
yeah, I think maybe that's the equivalent of sending a kid off to college or something. But I think it's weird. I don't know. As even now, many years have gone by, but once in a while, I think 5 or 6 times Tayo and I have been either, and Anthony too. We were all at the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, I think in 2014 or 2000. I don't know. It was a few years ago, but we watched the movie together. Like there was a screening at the festival, and that's happened to me a few times where both Tayo and I have been there, and because TechCon is, for better or worse, seen as one of his sort of signature works, they haul it out when they're doing a Tayo retrospective or Tayo weekend or whatever it is. And so, uh, yeah, I'd say 5 or 6 times I've been, had to watch the movie with him. I find it very difficult to watch. So my first impulse is let's go out and get drinks, and after we're liquored up, we'll come back and watch the big explosion at the end. Or it's a little, yeah, it's just a very hard for me to sit through it, and even harder for me to sit through it next to Tayo, sitting next to him, where we're kind of, that when you're in a movie theater and you're someone just breathing next to you, but I don't know if it's out of respect to me, or I can only assume at this point that it's because he really enjoys watching it, is that he'll always, I'll be like, "Are you sure you want to watch this? We don't have to stay here. We can just, introduce it and then let's go get dinner." And he'll be like, "No, no, I want to watch it. Let's watch it." And
Oh,
so that shows me that that he's into it and he's enjoyed it. He's always been very generous with his praise for our work. But then he's also very clear, like that's your Tekkon, like that's not what I saw in my head. So he's, he's kind of made peace with the fact that it's not all his DNA. It's something else, and it doesn't seem to have affected his appreciation for it.
He sounds
Um,
like a very generous man, because I know that mental calculus when you're watching something that you know that there's something going on in the person beside you, and I can only imagine how amplified when it's two creators
well,
of a thing.
I've worked with other authors who are not so do whatever you want with it. I had this TV series I did, Tokyo Alien Brothers. It's not animated, but it's based on a manga by one of Tayo's proteges, who I came very well recommended to him, and he had every reason to trust me. But he, maybe because he was young and didn't have a lot of, he was still getting started, but he really every opportunity for to uh, uh, assert his you know fatherhood over the project. It was like, it was not contentious because we had similar tastes, and once we got past the, like, I'm taking control here kind of thing, it was okay. But it was just the complete opposite of Tayo. For whatever reason, he was okay with me and Anthony, like two American guys doing something, our thing, based on some pretty flimsy, demo material. And you
And
know, I I can't really thank him enough for that, because um, yeah, I don't think that's that common, but it's, as Anthony said, it's kind of necessary. You really have to be able to make it stand on its own as a movie or as a screenplay. It has to work on a very different level from the manga. I mean, it's great to have manga source because it kind of bootstraps the whole thing. You have all this visual reference and
you've almost got storyboards, right?
all this stuff, but it's not a storyboard in any way. It's not. It's just, as many times as not, it's a point of departure. And you kind of double back and say, oh, no, 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 we're not doing that. That's fine for a comic strip, but it's not going to work on the big screen, you know. Especially something like Tekkon and a lot of Tayo's work, because it's serialized either weekly or monthly or bi-monthly. There's, a real kind of rep. There's a lot of repetition or kind of summarizing built into it, that, I don't know, that when you have all the momentum of a movie behind something, you can kind of blow past a lot of, people don't really have to understand stuff.
Connective
You
tissue
as
can,
long
yeah.
as they're kind of riding on the right rails.
I
Um,
mean, was that a lot of, like, Anthony, was that a lot of your role to, like, mold the structure from the thing into something tighter and more linear?
Oh, most definitely. And again, it's just one thing, that you need to do, especially with material that, and I'm not knocking it, but it kind of goes on and on. And, many of these manga are set up for multiple volumes. And Tayo even described how there were potentially going to be more, but he got cut off at the end, and he ended up having to tie it up faster than perhaps he wanted to. I don't know if that's so noticeable when you read the manga,
Yeah, I think
but
he said he was planning to do an entire fourth volume, maybe a
yeah,
fifth even, and his
exactly.
editors told him wrap it up.
Yeah. So you can kind of tell that there's a kind of quick, let's get to the big explosion at the end. But the things you need to take apart the entire engine to make one of these things. And so you got to find the themes that interest you, and you really have to create threads of different characters. And so it's a whole deal. It's
And were you doing this in Japanese? Like, I'm actually curious in how the
yeah,
logistics all work of this. I know Michael was in Japan and working closely and doing everything, obviously
yeah.
in
Well,
Japanese. But you would, were you also like,
very
were
much
all your
like
notes and screenplay in Japanese as well?
everything was in English, and I speak very little Japanese. I can get in and out of a taxi, and probably I can order food, and I've spent a fair amount of time there. But no, I don't speak or write in Japanese, and I more power to any Westerner, which includes Mike, who can. But so the workflow is maybe something Mike could speak to, but that might be getting a little bit too much in the
It
minutia.
just, we had an English language, an English translation of the comic, and it was a decent translation. And that's where Anthony kind of spun off from. And, in all honesty, by that point, I was also looking at the English version, certainly as much as the Japanese version, just because, it's it just reveals different layers to me when I'm seeing it in English. And, you know, I I say
Yeah,
that it
I
just
mean,
comes in a different portal.
just to speak to that, and maybe take us to the back end, what was really exciting to me, and very kind at some point late in the production, once it was going to make its way out into the world, is I was included in the process of subtitling. And what was incredible was that in the translating of the piece, it was very clear that it was really nicely aligned with one of the final drafts that I turned in. So
Mm.
Yeah.
that was, that can be a real crapshoot. This had never really been done. I mean, we did some of this work on Animatrix. I was credited as story editor, I think, but I actually, and not to really broadcast to the world necessarily, but I did end up writing, sort of full scripts for those. But the same process had to exist where these were Japanese directors. In Mike's case, he was an incredible middleman. And here he was, the director, who could essentially say, no, this is where we're going to go in this direction, and was very loyal to the script. Because he and I mean, we were off on an island for a while, which is unusual, but we had some time to really explore the thematics and the story, and who these characters were, and again, the city and what it represented. And just, we also speak the same language. We finish each other's sentences. We're to contextualize. I'm honored to be able to call Mike my best friend, and we go way back. I mean, we went to college together. We were film geeks, just who sat in rooms and talked about cinema, and that's really our background. And dreaming of creating projects and telling each other about the great stories we had in our heads, and hoping to work together at some point. I lived in LA at the same time as Mike did. We were both working in the business, so there was that sort of shared experience that we had, and then we had this incredible chance. He pulled me into Animatrix, and then onto this. So um,
Yeah, the movie itself, I mean, it's clearly steeped in certain traditions of anime, but it feels different in some difficult to wrap your arms around way that I mean, maybe it's the fusion of the CGI and the cell animation, but even the storytelling style and everything, and maybe with so many different cultures being put into the pot. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Tayo himself was in Paris when he was writing the manga, so there's this all these different
No,
avenues. Um,
well, Tayo's he's got a kind of unique personal history, but it's very kind of grounded in Japan. It's not, there's nothing exotic about him in that sense. He's very kind of Japan centric in his cultural references. Um,
oh no, I don't even mean cultural referencing. I mean actual the feel of the way that the dialogue moves, the feel of the way the story flows. It
I think
feels
that's Anthony's script and maybe our sensibilities, like the
hmm,
way we approached it. You know, our reference, because we weren't, neither of us are like anime fans. We're, you know, movie geeks, if anything. So our references were, you know, classic Hollywood movies, spaghetti westerns, you know, B grade, you know, horror, you know, sci-fi, you know, whatever we were consuming. And so we weren't, it wasn't like we were digesting Japanese animation and trying to make our version of that. We were talking about how, you know, this is like that Sergio Leone movie, or this is like, you know, our, we just have very different,
Godfather. Yeah.
yeah, we were looking
Um,
at this in very different terms. So I think if it feels different, like if there's a, it's because, you know, what we pulled out of it, out of the source, but also what we embellished it with, it was all, you know, it was all movie stuff. And there's a certain, you know, a lot of, I'm not saying that it's any different with movies, certainly now it's not, but a lot of Japanese animation is very kind of self-referential. So it's, you know, all those things which an anime fan just getting into the medium, you know, thinks it's unique, or, you know, seeing it for the first time, a lot of that stuff is, it's almost stereotype, you know, from the stuff kids here grow up watching on TV. You know, a lot of the kind of action heroes, or, you know, sailor uniform, you know, there's just a lot of I guess tropes that are, or, you know, archetypes which are unique to animation. Well, maybe not unique to animation, but they're, it's part of the vocabulary here.
the
And
Japanese
I think
animation
Anthony and
industry
I,
specifically, yeah.
yeah, our knowledge of anime was just, I mean, for me, it was mostly through my work on Animatrix, which exposed me to a lot of stuff.
Hmm.
And, you know, there was a lot of great artistry and a lot of it, but it didn't, it wasn't the language that I was speaking. It certainly wasn't. When Anthony and I talked about Tekkon, we were, you know, referring to The Godfather or La Strada, or, you
I
know,
I get
just,
huge,
yeah,
huge.
Los Olvidados,
yeah.
you got to get to the core, right? What is this actually? What is this story about? It's about these two miscreant kids, right, who are outcast and orphaned. And we wanted to tell us a real raw kind of movie that was tough. This is, they live in a very tough environment. these two kids. And then there's the sort of Yakuza gangster story. So what are the references? Those are two of the strong ones.
I can tell you, the more I watch the film, the more I see Wong Kar-wai's Chungking Express. I just, maybe it's the rhythms of how,
Interesting.
because of all the step photography in that, and the way that it's such a heightened, it's both romantic and anti-romantic at the same time, and that's a hard balancing act in any medium. To be both wistful and almost live in a non-reality, but all the emotions, learning, and themes are hard reality
I mean,
things.
to be fair, that's also something it's definitely in the manga. The way it feels very familiar and but also very exotic at the same time, or there's like a sense of nostalgia, but also a sense of real, like, kind of modern, that it's a war between those two kind of
Oh,
movies
most definitely.
in a lot of
And
ways.
he doesn't need an advertisement, but let's just throw it out there again to Tayo. All of his work is like that. There's this huge beating heart that's at the center of his work, and yet it's all within context of orphan boys and terrible realities, living in the streets, and how do you overcome these harsh forces which are modern, right? This is modern society just pushing itself up against these very human and tendencies of let's hold on to our memories and let's hold on to the ones we love, and and it just keeps subverting that and beating on it. So a lot of that is in the work for sure, definitely.
No doubt. I mean, the city itself is endlessly fascinating. I can't think of too many films where you feel the subway, like the elevated train route, the water towers, like it's so geographically like astute. I don't know how else to phrase it. I mean, there's a scene in the movie where there's a neighborhood or a part, and it actually dissolves into the map in the Yakuza office, and that's what I did not get this on first viewing. There's a lot coming at you on first viewing, but as you watch it again and again, and the technical person in me is just kind of staggered by the amount of background art in the
I
film.
think I have that map.
Yeah, you do. It's up on your wall somewhere.
It's up on my wall. Yeah, it's
Ah,
beautiful, beautiful.
But I mean, how many people were doing just the background art alone that depicts all the alleyways, the rooftops, the vistas of the city, and the various different offices that are in the context of all of the different characters in the film. I mean, that alone, that aspect is I mean, I've seen other films that have that level of density, but this film does it in such a, I don't know, it's right in your face way, and it's a really focused on letting you live in that town. Like it has to make you care about the town to understand where Kuro and Shiro are with defending that town.
well, that was like the life of the city and the kind of the city growing up, evolving into something different. That was kind of the overarching narrative of the script, and it's kind of it's a little more subtextual in the manga, but it's there, it's about the bad guys coming in and trying to take over our part of the city, and kind of all these people fighting over who owns that. In the manga, it's more of just a street corner than a whole city. And a lot of the credit for scaling it up into the entire metropolis would have to go to my art director, a really brilliant guy named Shinji Kimura, who I think like I had a very, I think it was the first time we met actually. I told him I wanted the city to be the star of the movie. And of course, that's what all art directors want to hear, you know. Who needs characters? Um, and he saw, I think, I had been kind of trying to make a map of the city, and it was really just pretty pathetic because I was still kind of, you know, I had made it considerably bigger than the comic, but it was still, you know, just a few blocks. And I think he saw what I was trying to do, and he also realized that I wasn't able to articulate the that idea. And also, uh, you know, he saw what was in the script and what was in the source, and how this is, you know, if you interpret this to be, you know, not just a village, but a whole city. And he saw, you know, I was trying to make my little island, which was really a tiny island. It wouldn't work. You know, he scaled it up to like the size of Manhattan, maybe, but surrounded on water so that somehow this thing would have a different lifespan, a different timeline than the area surrounding it. And when everything starts to get kind of, you know, plowed under by the real estate developers, or, you know, when the neighborhood starts to change, there's going to be this island in the middle, which is kind of the life of the whole area, but it's resisting change. It doesn't want to grow up. And that's a metaphor as for the way the kids, they don't want to grow up either. They want to hold on to what's theirs, which is that it's their freedom, it's their innocence. And so we had this, I think Anthony and I, anyways, had a very sort of romantic idea about making it into this, you know, big metaphorical construction. And at the same time, Shinji saw that, you know, that actually, I think, inspired a lot of his approach to the art direction, and that he could, you know, contrast the kind of old Asian, kind of grimy, gritty area with a ton of street life where, you know, every street you want to go down that alley because it looks so, you know, exciting and interesting. It's got so much detail and so much life to it. And, you know, he could contrast that with, you know, every neighborhood in Tokyo basically being slowly turned into a shopping mall. Or, you know, maybe Anthony would be able to say better, but you know, this like Times Square in New York, or, you know, it's all heading in that very generic kind of impersonal direction.
Yeah.
Not that, you know, maybe there's a bright side to that too, but, you know, what for this story anyways, it was, anyways, so long story short, Shinji really, he made a map that really was worthy of the story, and he filled it in. And then because we had a very long pre-production period when we were just mapping and designing and doing that stuff, by the time we started actually figuring out how to stage scenes, especially like the big action sequences where you're going all over the city, we had the kind of, you know, we had the map of the, you know, what's on this corner. Whereas if you go from the bathhouse to the train station, you're going to go through this park, or this, you know, there's a lot of spatial stuff that informed our staging as much as the other way around, you know, where I think it's probably more common to say, oh, we have a scene that takes place here, so we got to design something to, you know, fit into that slot. Whereas in a lot of ways, we had the map first, and we were figuring out kind of, oh, to get from here to here, there's no way to go except through this section. You're always going to have to cross the river if you want to go there.
Well, and the camera itself, the perspective often is first person. So like it's not just you're designing it, but we're often moving through the city even in that way, right? The way the camera often turns corners, and I know animation has done that, and it's difficult to do well, and maybe the CGI tools just arrived at the right time to give Tekon, uh, I don't know, it looks, even looking back on it now, it feels fresh, it feels
Well,
interesting the
no,
way
Studio 4 Degrees
we move through.
at the time, 4 Degrees, we were Koji Morimoto was still kind of a very charismatic creative force at the studio. And he had started a lot of that stuff with a short film he did called Noiseman, Sound Insect, and with a couple music videos he did. And that was used those techniques were further developed when we were doing Mind Game. There's a couple sequences in that which are very kind of 3D-ish, and also Animatrix has tons of that kind of quasi 3D hybrid background, hand-painted universe kind of thing.
But it
So
feels like they met at this one,
yeah,
like
we had the
real big unveiling, so to
yeah.
speak.
I mean, they've taken it further, particularly a guy named Shojiro Nishimi, who was the animation supervisor and character designer for Tekkon, and the same team of the CG director from Tekkon and the art director from Tekkon. The three of those guys, they've made a couple more movies. A very strange, like French hybrid kind of co-directing job that is all done. The whole movie it's like a trip through a Tekkon version of LA. It's a you can bleep this out, but the movie is called Motherfuckers, and but it's an incredible movie, and I mean very different sensibility from Tekkon, but the art direction and the approach to animation is of a piece with it. And then they did an episode of it was like a Batman animated omnibus that 4 Degrees did with that
It's
same
the
team.
Gotham Knight, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. But it's also like um, visualized very much in that way. And I think they're doing another movie now with the same kind of three guys.
I mean, I see the like 15-year later version that really popped out for me was um, Makoto Shinkai's Your Name and Weathering with You. There's some pans, like interesting pans, or like what I consider like traditional camera moves that I've never seen done in like cell animation. And that when I was watching Your Name, amazingly in a Canadian commercial release in the cinema, I immediately thought back to, wow, this is 15 years after Tekon. Like
Mm.
it really did feel like that. I know Tekon really opened my eyes to how digital can not get in the way. It can augment in very exciting ways, and because Tekon still feels like, like a hand drawn film, it really does. But it has those things that just make it move, and when you're moving through the city, it I find it
Well, they
very
don't
fascinating
really
even today.
they don't often make movies like that anymore. That's a funny story. I um, so Studio 4 Degrees released art books for this movie, Motherfuckers, and another recent movie that Shinji Kimura did the backgrounds for. And they're beautiful books. But one of the things that I was really proud of with the Tekkon art books is that there's a lot of commentary. There's a couple of interviews with him, and basically he gives the backstory behind every background painting for, a couple hundred
Oh
pages.
wow. Is this in that super special edition of the film that's released?
No, no, it's just in the books, these
Okay.
art books of his background. I mean, they're kind of beautiful
Hmm.
books. But the more recent films that he's put out, books of his work, they have no commentary at all, no text, no supplementary text at all. And I asked him why that was. I mean, I said I thought that was one of the really cool things about Tekkon is that you actually kind of explained your thought process for every, if not every painting, but at least every scene, like every, why did you do it like this, or why did you have this guy paint it, or why did you take this on yourself, or what went into it. And he said the reason he doesn't do the commentary anymore is because it's all digital. It's boring. There's nothing, you didn't sweat over it. I mean, and that was kind of a shock to me because I thought, well, it doesn't make it any less, of a, just the fact that it's all digital doesn't really, no one can take it away from you just the same. It's still something you poured yourself into. He said it's just not the same. You don't want to talk about, you know, which software you used, or how many times you had to, you know, down res it or color correct it, or he just said it's very different. Like when you're painting on paper, it's each brush stroke is for keeps. And I mean,
There's an
Anthony
undo
saw a
button
lot
in
of
digital.
a lot of the background artwork for Tekkon, like in the flesh, and it's each one, they're beautiful, beautiful paintings. And, you know, I would go over to Shinji's desk once in a while and, look down into his wastebasket, and there would be like 10 drafts in the garbage, like, and each one of them was, you'd want to hang it on your wall. And I think, I mean, that's what I feel like 15 years after Tekkon when I see, no, not taking anything away from Makoto Shinkai, but I look at that stuff and to me, it has a very, very digital, very cold and sterile texture to it, the artwork. To me, it feels totally man-made. And Tekkon, and of course, all the Ghibli movies and, stuff from that kind of pre-digital days, you look at it and there's a real texture to it, real, not man-made, but handmade, like handcrafted feeling to it that um, I feel like we've kind of lost some of that.
Yeah, this film wouldn't have worked nearly as well if it didn't have that quality, for
I mean,
sure.
I think that's one of the things that is kind of cool about it is that, we had all these kind of digital trickery to get us around the corner or make the crane shot, but it was all, we were basically making a diorama out of like little
Mm.
hand painted, scraps that we were, it's such an, um, just a house of cards kind of, there's a real, it feels very ephemeral in a way that a lot of digital backgrounds somehow don't have that texture to them.
Well, the film Nerd of Me is coming out, but you also worked in some small capacity on The Abyss and particularly Total Recall. Like Total Recall was like the last movie to not really have much digital in it, and
Yeah,
a
both of those
huge
were,
budget movie. They're
well,
right
each
on
of
the
those
cusp,
movies
right?
had a pretty impressive early CG sequence, but they were also
lots of models,
staggeringly
lots of,
big,
yeah.
yeah, all rubber bands and baling wire.
You see, now we're getting nostalgic for like the kids are for their neighborhood. It's like the industry has changed, but it won't take away that it was there at some point, right? Like that is like the main theme of the movie, is that you can't stop progress. You can hold on to it, you can remember it, you can pass it in whatever way you can to other people, the next generation, because there's a very generational thing going on in the film. But whether developers come in or whether you just get in a war over something, it's going to keep progressing. Like we spoke briefly before we started this on, like the film is not anti-gentrification. It might be from Kuro and Shiro's point of view, but it really is saying that, particularly from Rat's point of view, like you have to square that cities of metropolis of these size are always in churn. They always are. You can never quite hold on to that perfect moment that you personally associate with a city. I think that's what makes cities so fascinating, is that they're always at war with their selves, and they have activists on all sides and whatnot. And I mean, I know Tokyo was going through some stuff at the time, and cities almost always are. But this film captures that in a very unique way that sets it apart from almost anything, animated or not, that I've seen. And that's I think that's what makes, for me, there's so much going on in the movie, but that is what I keep coming back to take away, is how all the characters at some point or another refer to Treasure Town as their town, and they all have their vision, and their visions are often in extreme conflict. Some ways are very passive, and some ways are very aggressive, and that.
Well, it's a nice thing to hear,
Yeah.
because that is exactly, well, at least one of the biggest things we were trying to do. There's two things riding along parallel to each other, which is, as you referred to it, the churn in the city and the churn inside these characters. And, that dynamism between, as kind of maybe stereotypical as the characters are named, black and white, they are sort of in opposition to each other. One sort of the impetuous force of violence, and one the playful innocent. And what happens to them as they move along parallels what's happening to their city. And that was kind of that's what we were attempting. And when you speak of the city and changes, I mean, Mike and I will both say, and I think I could speak for him, that we mourn it. We mourn them ripping the old town of Shanghai apart to sell it, for parts. And glass and steel is cool. I'm a modernist. I love modern architecture, but what are we going to be left with? And who suffers, right? If we're going to build a huge arcade or Disneyland for basically the sons and daughters of the bourgeois, who's getting displaced? So there's some implied social commentary there for sure as well. So yeah, there's a lot there, and I think that it's in the manga, but again, we were trying to really be laser-like in condensing it into something that would work in the context of a feature.
Yeah, I think our leaning into that is one of the things that makes it feel maybe like a little more grown up in a way. Because I mean, it also has all the very kind of superficially anyways, it's got like flying superhero style characters and aliens and, bit of gunplay and, it's some big action scenes. So it's, I guess we maybe might have taken a different approach, and it was just, I think, because of what we were going through, personally, and what we were seeing around us at the time, that maybe pushed us a bit further in that direction, seeing our neighborhoods change, and kind of struggling to hold on to something, and feeling a little unmoored.
Yeah, the violence as well. I mean, Snake is basically a terrorist, and
Yeah.
we were, Michael and I was in Tokyo, strangely enough, being a guy who was living in the East Village at the time of New York City, in Tokyo for 9/11. And we watched it together at a mutual friend's house. And, that as well, seeing the destruction, seeing a city being the focus as a symbol, I think it definitely also played a role in how we were looking at this as a small, intimate story that had huge implications. And of course, that's what you want, right? You want to create something of universal meaning out of something that's small and local
and specific.
Yeah.
Right, like the universal but specific. You
Yeah,
can be from
exactly.
any city, you can be from anywhere, and understand that stuff. I know on your own home territory there, the activist journalist Jane Jacobs, who would have probably have passed while you guys were finishing, because she died in
Yeah, that might be
2006.
right. Yeah.
She said she's got so many great quotes on cities, but one is by its nature, the metropolis provides what otherwise could be gained only by traveling, namely the strange. Like that's what I feel like when I'm inside Tekkonkinkreet, is those alleyways. I want to go down them. I want to turn. I want to go to the bathhouse. That lovely scene where Gramps is bathing White, and they're really talking about, it's time to move on, children. Like you're growing up, and you can't be running around forever. And there's a resistance to that. But I mean, yeah, like you said, if you make everything into an international airport, then where's the strange? And I mean, Tekon is a celebration of well, I mean, it's the most distilled version of a cosmopolitan funhouse.
I like that description.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, again, going back to the humanity, what is being squeezed out. I mean, if you're describing it as the strange, that works just as well. But again, who inhabits these places? And it's fine to replace towns with beautiful, shiny things, and there will be people who live in them. But what's being erased? Even a strip mall, even a strip club has meaning for some, and that you kind of beautifully outlined the kind of the sadness of that, of the Yakuza head, who's so so weary, right, and so angry in a way, but accepting. I think we talked a little bit about that too, about his acceptance, that there's this inevitability.
Yes, he welcomes his exit in a way that is quite profound. It has almost a, like, forget Yakuza, more of a samurai tradition of my time has passed. I will exit gracefully, with violence, but gracefully, and at the hand of his own protege, which is weirdly loving. Like you get the contrast of his execution of Snake, which you know like that whole parallel of Suzuki and Kimura to the boys themselves is an interesting. Not a lot of movies give so much time to all the side characters, and I love that we spend a lot of time. Like we go to the strip club
I
with
think our
Brad.
first draft gave a lot more time to the side characters.
Definitely.
Yeah, and then you have to start making cuts,
Right.
right? Like, but
And
I know the good news is that about an hour and 50 minutes long, there's enough breathing room. I mean, I always come back to the sequence where Kimura is in bed with his wife. There are not a lot of female characters in this film, and
no,
she, in like 2 minutes, you get so much with her, and we're witnessing all of the flights of fantasy and the kids alternate reality, and then here's a guy with his wife literally blowing smoke in his face, you know, and having to make tough life decisions after he's had all these injuries inflicted by a kid. That's such a melancholic sequence. You don't see that
don't
kind
forget,
of.
don't forget the flash forward to him on the beach with his son, and her saying, "I don't want to have your kid." I mean, that you're right. There's a lot there.
Yeah, I
Definitely.
mean, it does bring me back to something like I always go back to the 8.5, the Fellini movie, where I watched it at 18 and I didn't really like the movie. And then I watched it again at like 25 and I saw something different. And then I watched it again at 35 and I'm like, how did I not see this? And anime rarely has that quality, like to where you get at least the ones that are huge. Like I guess any pop is going to necessarily sacrifice grit. That's just the nature of pop. But like to have that play out so interestingly in and have all those scenes, like again, like the scene where they go to the strip club, I think you have to have a certain experience with down market, sort of like maybe they should have closed this place years ago to get. I'm sure there's a weird German word for that feeling. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
but I'm like, oh well, I get it. Like listening to music, I get it. I don't need to have a word for it. I get it from that sequence, and yeah, I think someone that just randomly wanders into Tekken and watches it, and then watches it again 10 years later and 15 years later. I
Maybe
think,
they'll appreciate the strip club more.
but I think there's a gift to you. All movies should be different. They should be new movies when you watch
Well,
them later in life,
that
right?
is the sign of a good film, isn't it? I mean,
That's
one of my film mentors used to say, after we watched a movie, he'd go, "I really liked his performance today." And that's this notion, that you are seeing a different film because it's all about you and what you're bringing to it. And I'm paraphrasing Stanley Cavell, a great film theorist,
I know
who
Stanley.
really talked about the fluidity of movies in that way. And, so that's great. I think that is very true, though, of the great films. When I rewatch movies, and I think it's important to rewatch movies, you see them differently, definitely.
Yeah, I mean
For
it
sure.
yeah, it's I mean even you rewatching it this time. I mean the other thing is that the film has a density that you have to unpack, like let alone the themes, and just it has a visual density that you have to unpack. It is does the film screen often around, because I feel it's somewhat of
Yeah,
a
it's
cult item, like seeing it on the
now
big
and then I'll
screen.
see it's always screening in some country. They'll
Yes,
do like a
most
college
definitely.
show or a film festival or right now it's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place until Sony decides what they want to do uh, with the streaming of a lot of their anime.
Yeah, that's been I think,
Tekon kind of fell through the
unfortunate
cracks, so
trajectory.
it's not easy to find these days. I mean, I'd encourage anyone to pick up the Blu-ray because it's really beautiful looking, and I mean, I these days I would rather watch it in a good home theater off Blu-ray than definitely rather see it that way than on a old print. Um,
There is something though about watching a movie of this nature, which has some pretty raw emotions. It's trying to pull an adult audience back into childhood in many ways. To watch that with a crowd,
oh yeah, I
you're a
mean
little bit naked.
it's
Like
great
if
to
you're in a
see.
full house, I do
Yeah,
remember. I don't back in the Fantasia premiere, the Montreal audience is like a super excited
yeah,
about everything. They're very loving audience, but I do remember there was this feeling of like, whoa, this movie is it's not as light and fun. You know what I mean? Like there's some real wallops in the movie that, for a genre film, Fantasia is no stranger to that type of content. But for the big opening film, I think there was some strange periods of quiet because I think it was just on a first viewing there was almost like an overwhelming, and maybe you could talk. I remember you were there
yeah, yeah.
at the screening
I
way back,
remember.
but that was the North American premiere perhaps.
No, we had our North American premiere at
That was
MoMA,
MoMA. Yeah.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah, Museum of
and
Modern.
I think by that point I had taken it to uh, Berlin
Yep.
and Hong Kong and Deauville, or I don't know. It'd been around a bit, but that was because I had worked for Softimage, which is a Montreal-based company for many years. That was in a lot of ways like a homecoming for me. My two um, kind of mentors in computer graphics were sitting with me in the theater, and there was a very rowdy kind of home team vibe to it. All the Softimage people were sitting in the rows behind me. And yeah, I mean, it was one step removed from like showing it to my grandparents or, showing it to my schoolmates or something. So there was that side to it. And again, having to stay there with, and watch it with an audience is, I don't know, a kind of unnerving experience for me. Talk about feeling naked. I mean,
Mm.
it's really like people are showing your baby bath time pictures or something. It feels very weird for me. But I remember the audience being really, really nice to the movie, and people seemed, um, I don't know if it was not what they expected. Fantasia is kind of all over the map in terms of the stuff that they
They program right.
choose. So, but I I also think, you know, people weren't used to watching Japanese animation so much. It was still kind of pre-anime fandom,
Mm.
or at least there were core fans definitely, but it wasn't like a household. You know, most people hadn't even seen a Miyazaki film by that
Well,
point.
I wonder though, because Fantasia had for several years been screening a lot of that. That might
Yeah,
have
yeah,
been
maybe
the
that audience
most the
did.
most literal, like educated festival audience in North America for
Right,
that
right,
for
right.
that for that content. But again, because the movie is still tilted a few degrees off of what normally a Western audience would expect from the content of anime that was coming over at the time.
Right.
Yeah, that was um, like I'm a really like I've seen a lot, but I guess I'm kind of like you guys. Like I'm not deep. I'm not a super fan of this stuff, but I like it, and I really like the features, like less than the series. Like I like the ones with a beginning and a middle and an end, and so I feel like I had seen all of a
Hmm.
lot of stuff going in, but it still felt like I was seeing something very fresh at the time, and even watching it the other day, I think it retains a lot of that power. It always makes me feel excited that somebody would randomly, like not be aware of it and just throw it on cold and
Well, that's really
and experience
flattering.
it.
I mean, that's really nice to hear. I'm always I spoke to a group of students yesterday at MICA, which is a Baltimore-based big fine arts school. Spoke to an animation class, and so the students, they're literally like the same age as my kids, and
Mm,
very wet behind the ears and excited about learning about animation. And um, so the teacher of the class had screened the movie, and we did kind of an informal survey to about half the class had already seen it, and I spent a couple hours with them, and it was really exciting to hear, in particular, like first impressions from people who had never seen it before. Even though as animation students, they're very literate, like they've seen a lot of cartoons.
right.
And for whatever reason, Tekkon's kind of not easy to see these days, but also I think, well, it's not
But
for me
let's,
to say whether it's underrated or not, but I think it's certainly underexposed.
whether you like it or not, though, it's a cult classic. And, I think Mike's maybe underplaying it a little bit I do teach at NYU, as you mentioned, and invariably, someone will come up to me at least once, every session, and I'm not a regular there because I, work professionally.
Work for a
Otherwise,
living.
yeah, but I mean, there will be students, and this is now I'm going on 8 to 10 years there, that will come up and say, "Oh my God, I'm obsessed," and it's got an interesting following, even though this sort of sad trajectory over the years, with some of the rights and the fact that it's not ever been really on a streaming platform except for a very sort of a short time. So I think audiences, we've talked about it as more of a mature or adult, whatever you want to call it, title, very much an aim, I think, to posit it that way. And so when audiences see it, whether it's at MoMA or the Berlin Film Festival, or as you're talking about Fantasia, or at a college, people react. It's a surprising piece of animation, especially when people see it in the States. We're so used to the infantilization of animation
Right,
here.
right.
So
Well, and that's what you want, I think, as a filmmaker. You want surprise on some vector, on like
yeah, on some level, you're right.
you always want to go, ooh, I haven't seen that, or I never thought about it in that way. I did a little bit of looking into like 2006, which was when the film was released in Japan. And that whole year, and maybe you could do this for every year, but I didn't. I just did it for this year. And that whole year is so weird, because all of the big titles, like the Ghibli film of that year was Goro's Tale from Earthsea, which is arguably one of the weaker ones. Not even arguably, right? And then
We're not going to
Pixar's
slag off
No
anyone.
comment.
No
Pix-
slagging.
Pixar was released Cars, but then you've got these films. I say in the margins, your mileage may vary, but there was this Danish film Princess that came out, which was a hybrid and very challenging, very
I remember
aggressive.
that, yeah.
And then Richard Linklater's A Scanner Darkly came out, the rotoscoped Philip K. Dick adaptation, Satoshi Kon's Paprika came out that year, and the South Korean Achi and CPAC, which is a pretty gonzo, full on, like you don't know what to make of that movie the first time you watch it. And I just feel, that's a very strange year for titles. Like that's a lot of interesting, a lot of unconventional storytelling and overall feel for one year. Like there is no
No, I
big.
think you're right. I think that you could look at the period even,
Was it a
maybe
transition?
not just that not just that year, but maybe a year before, going a few years after. And gosh, some of the most incredible, strange, and yeah, I would say transitional animated films coming out all over the world. Actually, I was kind of buoyed by it and thinking, wow, we're at the precipice of something. Even being hopeful that we could enter a period of what I would now call adult animation, although it makes you think of something else when you say that, but it
Fritz the
didn't.
cat.
Yeah, Fritz the cat. It didn't. It's
Mm.
especially here in the States, we're still kind of stuck in this rut, and I won't name the big corporation that
Yeah,
makes all the
yeah,
great ones, but
yeah, yeah. I do feel there. I mean, but I mean, Japan can be stuck too. Like there's a lot of obviously desire. These things are a huge number of people and a huge amount of money. I don't know what the formula is to both preserve and destroy Treasure Town, so to speak. Like to have the cake and eat it too, to where you can have all of this resources to do really exotic technical experimentation in a feature, but still, not have to cater to some like ultra wide money hoovering compromises. I mean, I just,
yeah, I mean,
I,
we're in a streaming era now, and we could talk about this for days, but
mm,
there's a lot of incredible work out there, and I think a lot of it is being made, or at least sort of partially financed by some of the big streamers,
yeah,
and it does come in tow with a lot of those issues you're talking about and problems with having to pay the master, but a lot of it's really interesting. So maybe we're at that point where it's going to continue to happen, and it's all around the creators, of course. And I think Mike could speak to this, that Japan is having its own growing pains around the industry. If you could, the big industry of animation.
well, yeah, they touch upon this in there's a documentary on Satoshi Kon called The Illusionist, and there are several people that go on camera to say how nobody's making any money. You know what I mean? Like that's a problem. Like if you want to keep the car driving, and that somehow that circle has to be squared. I don't know how that's done.
Mm.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's fascinating.
Are you
Uh,
working on something right now, Michael, in the animated space?
Uh, yeah. Kind of looking for a patron um, uh, stage of the project, but yeah, it's not. It's stop motion. It's not hand drawn, so little. Well, it's even a steeper climb in a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
was gonna
ways.
say that's an even harder space, but also a very
Um,
rewarding one.
but no, I mean, yeah, it's uh, challenging to make a living here, particularly when you're drawn to, you know, Taiyo Matsumoto and, that when you don't have necessarily a mainstream sensibility. But I'm not complaining. I mean, I still think, there's a lot to be said for making movies one frame at a time by hand. I mean, who draws every frame of a movie? That's nuts.
Mm, it is
Who
nuts.
just moving little puppets around on a table? Like, I want to hang out with those guys.
Yeah, well,
That,
that's
that's crazy. I really think, I mean, this is something that came up when I was speaking to the animation class at Micah yesterday. Um, I mean, I really feel like that, handmade animation, whether it's drawn or stop motion, it's like an endangered animal. We have to nurture that stuff, somehow save the last rhino, or, you know, I really think, especially when I'm working in animation, that there's, when I'm not, um, I feel like somehow it's God's work. I mean, I'm not a religious guy, but I really feel like there's something noble about not just making things, but making things by hand, like, telling stories with puppets and drawings. And I think that's cool.
now you're unquestionably sounding like the filmmaker who made Tekkonkinkreet because
Well, I don't know. I mean,
that's what they're
I
holding.
like,
They're holding on to it like as tightly as possible.
yeah,
It's
that's
I think
how,
he's just saying that he's passionate.
yeah.
That's where we
Well,
started, right?
as
All
as
we can work on is stuff that fascinates us. And craft is just so vital in our business. And there is a lot of it out there, and then there's a lot of the crap. So
yeah, and but you learn so many elements of narrative through the minutia of the craft, right? Like the so-called revealing of things by grinding grinding away, so to speak.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, like Michael said, animation is not nothing if having to labor over literally every frame in its own right. I guess maybe we can end here on what the rat says to Kimura at the beginning of TechOn is if you believe in something, you should believe in love of your craft, love of your future, love of everything. Like that's
Love
what
is all
keeps
you
us.
need.
Yeah, that's what keeps us going. I anytime I'm in a rough state and you find the right piece of music or the right movie, and it turns your whole worldview, maybe for a minute, maybe for an hour, maybe for a year, completely on its side. That's what the great ones do, you know?
Yeah, well, what saves Black? It's that connection, that human connection that he shares, and they will take that to the beach, and that will be fine.
Yeah, the beach is
They
enough.
they can live without Treasure Town, sad as it may be.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, guys, for. I think that talk went in a lot of different directions. I think we covered a lot of ground. I hope I wasn't too pestering of you, but you guys can handle this completely without me.
oh, that was a lot of fun.
No, thank you, and I wanted to just thank Spark,
Yeah.
because it's really cool being a part of it and having the film appreciated.
Yeah, look forward to visiting in person. I hope someday
Don't we?
soon. Because I really enjoyed the last time I was at Spark.
Don't we all?
Yeah, yeah. And thanks also to you, Kurt. That was great.
No, it was an absolute pleasure. I have the utmost respect for you guys, and it was just even doing the research around getting this was like super fun. Like it's like, oh, I get to voluntarily fall down the rabbit hole and see what's out there and revisit a lot of things and bring up my own memories of of that and then get to talk to you guys. It was really lovely.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we're back with the Legends and Landmarks Tekkonkinkreet question and answer portion of the program with director Michael Arias and writer Anthony Weintraub. And what we're going to do here is use the Q&A section for everyone in the audience. Type your questions in there. We will take, I will read them out, and Michael and Anthony will answer them. Is there anything you guys want to add before we get going, Michael and Anthony?
Nice to be here.
Nice seeing you all.
Okay, so I guess while we're waiting for people to type in questions, I will get it started. And after our conversation before, I think I was remiss in asking, like, is there anything either of you would like to see Sony Pictures do at this point with the film? Like, it's not on any streaming platforms. It's actually very hard to find serendipitously. If you have a friend that hands you the manga or hands you the physical media, fine. But for, like, that's not really how the world is operated much during COVID. And I was wondering both of your thoughts on that, really.
Well, I just hope that it's all being worked out and that the movie will be once more available to viewers on all platforms.
Yeah, I'd agree. I believe for a while it was on something called Crackle, which is owned by Sony, and it got discontinued or whatever, they terminated. So yeah, I think apparently there's some progress, but we'd love to be available.
The other thing I'd say is that you know, barring streaming, it's I'm really proud of the Blu-ray. It may actually look better on a Blu-ray than in theaters. It really is pretty great, and the guys did an amazing job of mastering it, and it's got some really cool special features. You can see me at my worst.
Might I add that the manga, though, was republished by Viz. I think that was concurrent with the film, all together in one package. And Michael and I actually did a little Q&A forward for that edition, and I think they did a beautiful job. So that's definitely available, and we're always trying to push the Taiyo Matsumoto show out there because his stuff is so amazing.
That is a beautiful edition. It's a bit pricey, but you get a lot in the package. Okay, we have a question from Annabelle, and I'll preface it with, I'm sure every film of every kind, and that probably goes tenfold for animated films that have all sorts of problem solvings and difficulty, but Annabelle is asking, what was the most difficult aspect of making Tekkonkinkreet?
I actually getting it greenlit was, you know, Anthony and I spent like on and off 6 years flogging our script and trying to get people interested and pitching it here and there with kind of a series of producers, and once I would say Sony got involved, or Aniplex, and the project had a home at Studio 4 Degrees. It was, I won't say easy going, but compared to the years of kind of banging our heads against the wall, I think, you know, the progress was being made in a more, I guess, linear way. So yeah, for me, the first 5-6 years when the project was in a very amorphous state with not a lot of forward momentum, that was quite difficult.
Do you have any particular advice for anyone? Your situation was rather unique as an American developing a project in Japan, but it could, I mean, in the world we live in now, anyone can be developing a project anywhere. But obviously, there's going to be cultural complexities, and like businesses operate differently everywhere within a country. And also, do you have any particular experience to share around maybe something specific, or it could be general, around doing that?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I feel pretty strongly, and that whether you're in Japan or in the United States or wherever, I think passion counts for a lot, and people respond to the creators enthusiasm for a project. And beyond that, I just say yeah, don't give up, because I think Anthony, help me out here.
Well, no, I would pretty much agree. Be dogged, and you're not going to be dogged if you're not passionate about it. So, before you get involved in something like this, know that it's a huge investment. And I'm not talking about financially. Many people are out there in their, offices or bedrooms typing away and hoping their dream project gets made. But what I mean is your resources are your time primarily. And so know that you're going to be spending quite a bit of time, whether it's 5 years or 6 years, whatever it took us to get it off the ground. That's going to be the case. So make sure you're in for the investment is what I would say.
When you're starting a project like this, and yeah, you're riding the passion or whatever, but there's always this, or maybe I'm speaking specifically for me, there's a certain level of anxiety when you jump in to something. I don't know if, anytime you're creating anything, there's that. Do you have like a particular way of pushing through that, or circumnavigating, when things just aren't working for you or whatnot?
For me, on Tekkon, it was always going back to the source, the manga, which never failed to surprise me or reveal new aspects, or it was that's especially with animation, where the life cycle of a project can be, it's not just 1 or 2 or 3 years. It can be much longer if you include the time spent developing it. One of the challenges for me anyways is, finding that enthusiasm for the project day after day, even though, even when you're in production, you may be just counting, frames rather than shots per day of material that's, there to, the fruits of your labors are not always obvious if you're not used to that pace. And so to get yourself psyched up for it every day, or before every meeting, it was always nice to have some pages of the manga that I had highlighted, or stuck post-its on just to go back to, because that's powerful stuff, I think.
Do you still have the monster book that you used during production? Like, do you still have the one like blown up with post-its? And
I do, but actually my son pulled a lot of the post-its out. And so it's not what it was, but it's it's pretty ragged. It definitely has battle scars. And I have a lot of notebooks of just, you know, thumbnails and clip art and just stuff, pages and pages of that.
Here's another question from the Q&A. Tekkonkinkreet still feels as fresh and unique today as it came out. How do you feel about the direction that the industry has gone, where so many projects look the same?
Is that the case? So many projects look the same? I don't know. I'm not really connected here, so I don't get to see a lot of stuff unless someone really pushes me to check it out. So I'm not really aware of what's on the shelves. But I mean, I kind of feel like, you know, even the bad movies, the fact that they get made is kind of a miracle of, you know, of timing and chemistry and all the other stuff that goes into making a movie. So it's hard for me. I can't think of a lot of movies, animated or not, where there's nothing redeeming about them, or nothing, you know, nothing that can be gotten from a viewing. So I don't know if animation is, I don't know, there's so many good things out here now. I mean, I can, you know, just the other day I turned on the public TV here and saw an episode of Yuasa Masaaki's series Eizoken wa Teo Dasuna, and it's insane. It's so good. And it's just a, you know, I don't know why it's on kids. It's like on an educational TV channel, but it's so out there. So, I mean, I think maybe you have to look a bit harder, you know, on the Netflix or Hulu or, you know, the platform shelves to find something cool, but it's out there, definitely. That's what I think.
I'd certainly echo the complimentary aspect of that question, in that Tekkon felt very forward when it came out. So a lot of the things that I've seen, you know, the people that are working right now, a lot of the big animated features that come out of Japan, I see aspects, you know, and they're done differently and whatnot, but they're done. I feel like the Tekkon was the first place that I saw some of these things like really leaned into, particularly the way characters' point of view is used in that film, the way they turn corners and move around. It was a very 3D-ifying of two-dimensional style animation, and it was pretty groundbreaking, I think, at the time, and that might put it in the where it's aged right now.
Well, thanks. I mean, that's not really by design so much as, you know, our technique at 4 Degrees had reached kind of critical mass after the Animatrix and Mind Game, that we were ready to do a lot more of those kind of complex hybrid 3D hand-drawn shots. And we had an art director who, you know, was able to put all the pieces together in his head, and, you know, it was a lot of factors. So, you know, it's easy to have like an idea, like doing a kind of first person shots, like point of view shots in a hand-drawn world, but to actually be able to execute them, you know, it takes a lot of different pieces. And yeah, I think that's, well, we were also the beneficiaries of a very, very long pre-production time and very, you know, years of development. So we actually had a lot of time to think about what we wanted to do if someday we could actually make our movie. And then even after we had a production, there was still a lot of time to just kind of tinker before we had a real deadline.
That feels like a gift in the
Oh
fast
yeah,
moving pace of the world right now.
it was huge. But that's how I think, I mean, you have to be able to experiment, to do something new. And, you know, if it's not going to be new, then
I guess you also had, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I guess you also had the benefit of the first trial run at with CGI. So I'm sure there was a lot of things learned in the original from the 90s before you leaned into the full feature and all of the time in between that, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's not so much technology as technique. The stuff we were doing, there were ways to do it. In fact, some of the old there's a whole sequence in Kiki's Delivery Service where you're kind of flying over the coastline, and the backgrounds are all, they're quote 3D unquote, but they're all hand drawn, and so, you know, people were. It's not that it was impossible for us to do it without digital tools. Impractical and difficult, but it was being done.
Yeah.
So
it looks pretty raw. Like I'm thinking Nausicaa as well. There's quite a few shots. This is back in the 80s, and but they look like, you can tell when when the animators leave their comfort zone of the side on versus the perspective. Like it gets, probably for technical reasons, it gets quite rough. Whereas I don't see, I feel like that barrier was gone by the time your feature was finished. Like, and now
maybe, yeah.
I
I
don't know
mean,
if that
if
inspired
anything,
other filmmakers to lean further in, or if it was just the universe saying it is now time.
yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it was that that our movie was very visible, and a lot of our staff, you know, because the animation community here, it's very centered on freelance artists, so there's a lot of cross-pollination. People, you know, do a show here and then figure out how they're doing it and take that somewhere else. So I think there's just been a lot of diffusion of our techniques. I mean, but again, I feel like sort of technology and technique is, that's sort of the, well, I guess it's interesting if that's what you're into, but you know, that's it, unless there's a cool story there, or, you know, I don't want to say message, but I feel that that's one of the things that makes Tekkon a cool movie, is that it actually does have a real heart to it. You know, it's not just eye candy, I hope.
No, it's got a heart, and it's often heartbreaking when you watch it as it goes up and down. I've got a question here from Nathaniel Bendong. I forgive the pronunciation, and doubly forgive the pronunciation if I mispronounce Japanese names. He's asking what your thoughts are on Masaki Yuasa's adaptation of Matsumoto's Ping Pong.
I love it.
Thumbs up from me too.
I think it's awesome. That's all I have to say.
I thought I mean, if you want to get into it, personally, I thought it really captured, you know, Tayo's, the heart again of Tayo's manga, and of course managed to maintain enough of that incredible energy, you know, that the sport of ping pong and what was the sort of moving force of that manga and made the movie also really exciting, but the characters really lived in my mind. I thought the actors were fantastic as well.
Got another question here. I'll direct it at both of you because it's always fun to do this, and it doesn't have to be in any particular thing. Anything that you guys have been watching, film, television, theater, that inspires you at the moment.
Whoa. That's a big one. Should we even mention Squid Game, which I actually really enjoyed. So I think that's on everybody's list. So maybe that's a boring example. Can I go back to animation though, that question about things looking the same? And I would just agree with Mike that there's a lot out there that's really extraordinary. And it just takes a little searching, but I don't know if anyone out there has seen Wolf House. It's pretty recent. And it's, I think, a Spanish creator. It was pretty amazing. I enjoyed something called Wolf Walkers as well. So there's, I mean, just in animation, I think there's some singular work out there.
They're Welsh, I believe. The
Yes.
Secrets of Kells. They also.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Mm.
Mike, what are you watching?
Well, I'm watching Masaki Yuasa's series. I don't know how the title's being translated in officially. I don't know. It's like keep your hands off the animation club. Eizoken ni wa te o dasu na, and it just really it's kind of about the birth of an anime nerd, and it takes place in a school, kind of the animation fans geeking out and comparing storyboards, and it's a lot of it is kind of an inside joke. I feel like to people who, so that people who are into anime or perhaps even make animation will get like another layer of it, but it's just really clever and stylish and, you know, cool. He's just so good at that. So, and I've only seen one episode and here I am raving about it, but I like all of his stuff basically.
Things should always have a hook, right? Like you should be excited about it after the first episode,
yeah.
right? Like that's particularly in series structure.
Yeah. It's that one is pretty cool. I don't think I'm going to pronounce it right, but I think they just call it "Keep Your Hands Off of Azuken."
Okay.
In English.
Yeah, maybe. Well, it's pretty neat. So
I've got another question here. Is there another manga that the two of you would collaborate to adapt going forward?
Many.
Yes. Yeah, we actually have been developing a series, and I think we'll just keep it at that. But yeah, certainly there are a couple of features as well. So we want to keep collaborating.
Yeah, well, you guys have a long history, but you also said that you guys like hanging out together outside of work, like insofar as it goes beyond a working collaboration and it's a long friendship, correct?
Yeah.
Indeed. We attended the same university, so that's where we met. And yeah, we definitely kept up a friendship over many years.
We've got a couple people in the chat that that consider themselves lucky enough to see Tekkon in the cinema when it came out. A couple other comments of looking forward to whenever you get something out the door. We all know how difficult that is. Well, I've got you here though. I am curious as to your thoughts on because you both worked on the Animatrix. Like there is a new film coming out at some point. I'm curious as to your thoughts about where that franchise, that filmmaking, the Wachowskis in general, going forward. If you have, you don't have to if you don't want to say anything, but I'm personally curious because I find the look and overall vibe of seeing a 20-year later Matrix. I don't know. I find it very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know that that team that was a big part of my life for, you know, between like from 1991 to 2004. That's all I was doing was Matrix stuff, and so I'm very excited to see the next chapter.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I'm not-
The trailer looks cool.
Neither of us are involved except as cheerleaders.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where they take it. Trailer certainly looks cool. And, you know, we're big Keanu fans. So,
Who isn't, right?
yeah. Good guy. Very nice man.
We have a question here on Taiyo Matsumoto and what he was like in person.
He's, you know, just he's surprisingly normal, really nice guy, soft spoken. You know, he likes to, well, he's into all, you know, he's very kind of, when you talk to him, he seems very kind of middle of the road. He's into sports. He likes hanging out. You know, he lives near the beach. That's, you know, he's very chill, but at the same time, he's incredibly dedicated to his art. You know, that's he and his wife spend all their time making comics. That's all they do. And it's kind of awesome because, well, you know, it's one thing to meet a genius and think, oh yeah, crazy, mad, you know, exploding haircut, you know, weird, eccentric. But when you meet someone who's that, you know, seems so down to earth, it's actually very refreshing. You know, his favorite pastime is bowling. How much more, you know, down to earth can you get?
Oh, that's
Yeah, he's highly intelligent, shy, and as much of a small town guy he is, who seems almost hermit-like, as Mike said. He spends a lot of time on his work. He is, you know, culturally very deep. You know, he's got a lot of points of reference, and can converse about any number of topics and things and art. So, fantastic person.
If I recall correctly, Michael mentioned earlier that he has the mannerisms of Suzuki-san, the rat from Tekkon.
Did I say that?
You did.
Interesting.
I don't know. Maybe now. I mean, he just turned what, 54 a few days ago. and he's a little more, you know, a little rougher around the edges than he was when we first met. But I don't know, you know, he's got a kind of ironic sense of humor, I'd say. But you know, he's very approachable. Not at all. Well, what do they say? Still waters run deep.
Yeah, I mean, if I could share an anecdote here was, you know, this American guy that's brought in by someone he knew pretty well at that point, Mike, and I was going to take his baby and adapt it into a movie, and he wasn't at all shy about sharing a lot of the foundations of the piece, what motivated him to make it, to write it. So, you know, that's generous, and that's someone who was actually captivated by the form and interested in collaboration. And that, who else would you want as a partner?
While we're in an anecdote kind of mode, was there any fan or audience reactions from the film? One in particular that either of you stands out when you've traveled with the film and screened it at various Tayo retrospective, as Michael mentioned, and so forth. Is there one particular audience member or fan that maybe stands out to either of you?
One who, well, it wasn't at a screening as such, but I went to a kind of local manga anime. I think they're going to ring the bell, Kurt.
Ring the bell.
Here goes.
Wow.
Fabulous. For those of you who don't
I'll
know,
try and...
Oh man.
For those of you who don't know, Michael is in some sort of rural monastery at the moment. So this is not a static background for him. This is a
He
real
arranged.
dynamic space.
He
And
arranged this.
the bell was
set this up.
perfect. We were
Set this
hoping.
all up. He set it all up. He set it all
Just
up.
rang my bell. Okay. Now that I've had my molecules scrambled, what were we talking about?
Some
fan
crazy
interaction
fans
at a
and
manga
fan
festival.
interaction.
Oh no, I met a fan who had her arms and legs tattooed with Tekkonkinkreet kind of scenes, like a tableau, and she didn't use illustrations from the manga. She used shots from the movie, and I was particularly impressed by that level of dedication. And that, I mean, that's a real commitment. So that impressed me, and that was very shortly after the movie came out. Like, she had already, that was her thing.
You mean
was
while
cool.
it was still in theaters? Or
yes,
how would
yes.
you even get stills to do take a camera in?
She was into it. She was into it.
She found a way.
She was into it. No, she had her own little bar in Tokyo. I got to be friends with her. She had a little bar, and the place was decorated floor to ceiling with Tekkonkinkreet memorabilia, kind of toys, a lot of the stuff from the comic as well. But a lot of the samples that I got of figures and stuff, I would, when I moved, I gave her a box of just swag to decorate her shop.
Oh, that's sweet.
You can find a bar for anything in Tokyo, though. So
Just keeping it real, are you, Anthony? Just keeping it.
yeah. Just got to check you into that. You know,
I'm
wasn't that
always
special?
Inspired by a lot of the Tekkonkinkreet fan art I find on like DeviantArt and Instagram, and you know, there's some really far out interpretations and kind of reinterpretations, and some cool stuff.
One thing, when I was doing a little bit of looking around and researching around before our conversation, I did note how many people had like deep, like I know the internet is extreme, but like people that had a deep connection, like, you know, best favorite film ever. Like there's a lot of people that this film affected. Even when you're used to anime, the themes are so adult, and the themes are so go for broke in the manga, in the film, that I think that affected a lot of. You see it around when you look at people that make YouTube videos talking about it, like you said, in the fan art. It always strikes me as interesting when a film you know, engenders that strong of a response.
Isn't that
it's
the
out
great
there.
thing about movies and art in general, that you can feel a connection just from a whatever, the lyric of a song or a moment in a movie? Or I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it makes
You
you.
know,
It's got to make you satisfied with how this film has gone into the ether. It's gone out there globally over the last 15 years, right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel I don't really feel any. I mean, once it's in movie theaters, it's hard to feel, I guess, ownership of it. It kind of seems like its own sort of living, breathing thing at that point. And so, you know, how people interact with it, or, you know, make links with the movies, doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what we've put into it. It's, you know, it's its own thing.
I had a
So
professor.
it's very gratifying.
I had a professor, and he's a Canadian author, Guy Gabriel Kay, many years ago, that once said, like, he writes books, and he said, like, once you've published, you become just another like reader of your own work. You have more specialized information, obviously, but you become just another sort of critic, or just another observer of the work once you've finally put the pen down, or the close the editing bay, or
I think
whatnot.
that may be even more so in the case of film, where it's such a highly collaborative enterprise, and even more so in animation, where there's, you know, just, you know, you could fill a stadium with all the people who worked on these movies. So
Yeah, but what you're speaking of, Kurt, is just giving it out to the world. You know, that's what you do when you make art, right? Is you just eventually you have to just say, okay, it's going away, and then I guess, yeah, it's incredibly exciting when somebody like an animation festival or somebody ranks it in some best ever anime list. You know, that is incredibly gratifying. But you were speaking of somebody was talking about the written word and revisiting or looking at their pages or seeing it published. And, you know, I can't tell you when I saw this movie the last time, probably at Museum of Modern Art, which is where the US premiere. And so that was a long time ago.
And yet when this opportunity comes, you're like, I'm so there. I love talking about this. Like I like that.
Oh,
was
yeah.
the first comment I recall from you. Like, I will be there. I love talking about this project. I just love that, you know, 15 years later, that's like, yes, let's talk.
Yeah, no doubt.
So one other question. This is for either Michael or Anthony or both. Is there someone specifically that you would like to work with in the future?
Well, I'd like to work with Anthony again in the future. I don't know if that counts. Yeah, I'd like to do something with Anthony and Tayo as well.
I'll
you know,
sign on to that.
I have modest tastes. Just these guys is enough for me. Before I forget, I wanted to thank Spark for providing such a nice forum and for always being so great with not just with Tekkonkinkreet, but you know, in the past as well.
That's lovely. Yeah, we are winding down into the last 2 minutes here. Is there any final thoughts or final remarks that either of you would have to the audience?
I'd echo Mike just to thank you all for showing up and keeping the dream alive, as it were. Just you know, the movie is still kind of a underground classic, I guess you would say. It's well worth continuing to talk about with your friends, and it will live on, obviously, but even more people should be seeing it.
Annabelle in the comment section is, I hope we can see you both in person for the 25th anniversary of.
I was trying to
boy.
respond to that. That's really sweet.
Yeah, let's hope we're all on the same continent and able to get out of these Zoom boxes.
Well,
Astral plane.
It's one of those things, and I know Michael loves to push the Blu-ray and how beautiful the Blu-ray is, but there is something deeply magical about the collective, regardless, even prints that are all thracked up and whatever, when you all get together into a room and you hear people titter or laugh at a certain joke or gasp at a certain thing that maybe didn't affect you in a different way, it just informs your viewing experience.
You're not going to get any argument from us. You know, the theatrical experience is the best for viewing films, for sure.
I think we should spend our last minute, and I'll shut up now, of just watching Michael wander the grounds in cell phone vision, because it is such a beautiful part of the world that you're in.
He's going to end up at the same table, though.
But if I fall off the edge here, just, you know, it's been nice knowing you all.
Didn't you cue the bells for right now, Mike?
Okay, I think these guys are actually doing a rice pounding at the temple here. I don't know if you can see what's going on back there.
Bring us over there, man.
Pounding the hell out of that. This is just surreal.
Breakfast for the breakfast sushi.
No. Unfortunately, the breakfast was a very austere affair.
Well, thank you, Kurt.
No, again, thanks to Marina and the Spark Festival for setting this up and letting us all interact in in the unique way that has been the last 2 years, from different continents and different countries. And yeah, it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you guys and really dig into the meat, as it were, of Tekkon, and really give it another look. See, I would love to do anything that I can to help push more people to see this movie. I deeply love it myself, of course,
Oh,
and I love the experience. I love to share, right? Like as everyone does. That's just um, festivals have this effect on people. That's why they're so vital, for these things, to have a little more intimacy with creators, or to just bring a spotlight on films that really should be seen, out in the world, and never fade away.
I think I'm gonna go ring the bell. I don't know if
This is
I don't know
Michael
if
subversively ringing the bell.
I don't kill myself. Let's see. See if I can give you the view here. Ready? Can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
Is that Mike? That's not allowed. You're gonna get caught, man. Did you all
Okay.
know out there that the monks have their own police force? And there will be an anime series coming soon.
But first, the live version.
See, we're creators. We're just riffing, and we came up with a whole new series. Mike's doing the research right now.
Mm,
What
I
are you
can't
drinking
hear
there?
anything.
This is
Barista
what I love
Black.
about your situation right now, is how
Oof.
peaceful and serene it is. And then we all pull you into the real world of us demanding with our questions and our
Well, thanks a lot, Kurt, and thanks to Marina and the Spark folks as well. This has been really cool.
and likewise to everyone that tuned in and their questions. And we hope to see you next time. Cheers.